Welcome back to Two Pretty Good Bad Men, an Alias Smith & Jones podcast. I'm your Miracle Worker host, Tabitha, and today we are covering Season 2, Episode 14, Miracle at Santa Marta. This episode was shot mid-November 1971, and it aired on December 30th, 1971. It actually aired the day Pete Dool died. He reportedly watched this episode hours before he took his life, which is something that's kind of hard for me to shake when watching this one, but that's not the episode's fault, so I'm going to review it fairly and try and ignore outside information. The story was by Roy Huggins, and the teleplay was by Huggins and Dick Nelson. Nelson, who has already written several episodes by this point. And it was directed by Vincent Sherman. This is Sherman's only ASJ episode. He was a film director throughout the 1940s. He made movies like All Through the Night, An Old Acquaintance, The Young Philadelphians, and Mr. Skeffington. He was often called a woman's director because he was able to bring out very strong performances in his female stars. But he hated this nickname and argued that he directed Bogart and Newman, too. His career came to a halt when he was graylisted during the McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee disaster. He eventually rebounded and found a second career in television. He directed 29 episodes of Medical Center, 4 of The Waltons, 4 of Beretta, and 3 of Trapper John. He passed away just short of his 100th birthday in 2006. Our guest stars this week include Nico Menardos as the alcalde. He was already in the ASJ episode Journey to San Juan, so we won't go into his career again, but it is worth mentioning that Menardos was not Latino, but Greek. And when the character of the alcalde was set to make another appearance in Season 3, a group of Mexican-American protesters were loudly against the casting of non-Mexicans in the role of Mexicans, which is totally fair and right of them to do. I've seen a good deal of these old westerns by this point, and do you know how many white people I've seen in brownface? Anyway, Huggins reportedly tried to talk the protesters out of protesting, which... Really, Huggins? Really? Get fucked. But in the end, the role was recast with Argentinian actor Alejandro Rey in Season 3. But Menardos got paid for that episode anyway. Next is Craig Stevens as Rolf Hanley. Stevens is probably best known for starring in Peter Gunn. In fact, his performance as Gunn was supposedly the inspiration for the animated comedy show Archer. Stevens was born in Missouri, which, I'm sorry about that, my guy. But he was training to be a dentist, and far less dramatically was simply bitten by the acting bug. He also worked on shows like Hotel, My Three Sons, The Bold Ones, The Lawyers, The Incredible Hulk, and Dallas. He was also on an episode of Starsky and Hutch, Murder on Voodoo Island, aka Murder on Playboy Island Part 1. But his character only lasts for about 15 minutes and then gets voodooed to death. We also have Ina Balin as Margaret Carruthers. Balin was off to a good start career-wise. She got great notices in early film roles in The Black Orchid and From the Terrace. Sadly, she got trapped playing the girlfriend role in westerns, and nothing that she could really sink her teeth into. During the Vietnam War, she traveled to South Vietnam and was greatly moved by the experience. She ended up taking part in the evacuation of 400 orphans from Saigon in 1975. She adopted 3 of those children, and that's pretty damn amazing. Tragically, she passed away at only age 52 in 1990. One of her grandchildren is named after her. Next is Patricia Crowley as Meg Parker. Crowley got interested in musical theater at a very early age due to her older sister's influence. She starred on the TV series Please Don't Eat the Daisies, which lasted 2 seasons. The show was based on a Doris Day movie of the same name. Crowley also starred on the short-lived show Joe Forrester about a beat cop played by Lloyd Bridges. She worked on soap operas that I haven't heard of, like Generations and Port Charles. Apparently Port Charles was a spin-off of General Hospital. She guest starred on shows like Riverboat and Maverick, all the way up through shows like Friends and The Closer. She was in a really good HBO movie called 61 by Billy Crystal. It's about the season that Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris raced to beat Babe Ruth's home run record. I recommend it. As of this recording, she is still alive. And finally, we have Joanna Barnes as Mrs. Hanley. Barnes previously guest starred on one episode, How to Rob a Bank in One Hard Lesson, so we don't have to go into her career again either. On with the show. We open on a horse race in Yuma. No sneak peek. The boys are enjoying their snacks and checking out the contestants. They eye this pretty gray colt and consider placing a bet on it. A man named Rolf Hanley approaches, saying that his little filly would like to try against the other horse. and the owner of the colt, Bleecker, is incredulous. Hanley insists that she's a good racer even if she's only 3 years old. Hayes and Kid ditch the colt for the filly. Hanley says that he's taking her to Mexico to sell. He's just entering her in the race so she can get a little exercise. Our guys place their bets on her, and credits. And Craig Stevens gets the special guest star credit this week. The race gets going, and it's neck and neck for a while with the filly and the colt, and the filly ends up winning. The boys are ecstatic, but the guy who owns the colt is not. He accuses Hanley of tricking him. Hanley says that if the guy knew horses as well as he claimed to, he'd have known that his filly would beat his colt. The situation escalates, and the boys move to back Hanley up. Kid gets into it with the colt guy. He ends it quickly enough with his fast draw. But it impresses Hanley enough to offer them a job. At the saloon, Kid pulls Hayes to the bar and tells him that Hanley wants them to ride with him to Mexico as bodyguards. It pays $500. But Hayes is currently cleaning up at the poker table, so he tells Kid to do it on his own. He hands over half his winnings to the Kid and tells him to stay out of trouble, and he'll see him in a couple weeks. So Hanley and the Kid ride off in a private stagecoach. Unfortunately, they have an adrenaline junkie for a driver, and he ends up breaking one of the wheels off. He says it'll take a blacksmith to fix it. Kid and Hanley take 2 of the horses and ride to the nearest town of Santa Marta. You know they're in Mexico now because there's a mariachi band playing. The 2 are eating dinner at a restaurant when the alcalde, which he says means he's the mayor, the magistrate, and the police commissioner all in one, comes and introduces himself. He offers his services if Hanley needs anything. Hanley is charmed by this, but Kid lets him know that the guy was just kind of sizing them up. Like in a sexual way? Like in a I saw you across the bar and I'm digging your vibes kind of way? The next morning, Kid comes down to the hotel desk and receives a message from Hanley informing him that he will not be able to dine with him that night and to enjoy himself anyway. And Kid does just that. He and the alcalde kind of eye each other from across the room later that evening. And also the mariachi band is surrounding Kid's table. Like, did he pay them to play for him specifically, or are they just trying to annoy the white guy? Back in his room, there's a knock at the door. Kid assumes it's Hanley and tells him to come in. But it's not Hanley. It's 2 cops. They take him to the alcalde, who inspects Kid's gun without telling him what's going on. He notes that the pistol has been recently cleaned. Kid gets defensive and says, yeah, his pistol is always recently clean. Damn right, you think Kid Curry doesn't keep a clean gun? This back and forth between the Kid and the alcalde is really good, actually. Kid's giving back as good as he's getting, and I'm proud of him for that. The alcalde starts asking who he is and where he's from. The only people Kid can think of to vouch for him are Lom Travers and Joshua Smith. Well, that's not enough for the alcalde. He wants place of residence, former employers, etc. He finally tells Kid that Hanley was shot and killed and dumped over a cliff the night before. But Hanley wasn't robbed, simply murdered. And it must have been the Kid because no one else in Santa Marta knew him. I mean, I get questioning him, but it's not impossible to be killed by a stranger dude. Kid protests his innocence. The alcalde isn't buying it, so the Kid sends a telegraph to Hayes before they lock him up. Hayes heads down to Santa Marta. On the stage, he's riding opposite a recent widow named Meg Parker. They make some small talk on the trip. She claims she just wants to get away and has heard that Santa Marta was a lovely town. When they arrive at the hotel, Meg says she hopes to see more of Hayes. A girl is thirsty. I mean, I get it, I am too. Hayes goes to see Kid at the jail. He tells him that the man who owned the cult was shot and killed the day after Kid and Hanley left, so there goes that suspect. And then Kid's like, you're gonna get me out of here, right? And Hayes is just like, well, that'll take a miracle. Hayes, you could be a little more comforting in this time, you know? The alcalde enters the room with them. Hayes introduces himself as Joshua Smith, of course, and when the alcalde asks him if he has any references, he cites Lom Travers, and the alcalde's like, yeah, I've heard that one before. He tells the boys that the driver of their coach does have a criminal record. He also learned that Hanley was from Lexington, Kentucky, and that, interestingly, they have a permanent resident in this town from Lexington named Margaret Carruthers. So the situation is no longer as cut and dry as he thought it was. He's willing to release Kid from jail, but warns him not to leave town. And then he invites the Kid to dinner, because Carruthers will be there and he wants Kid's help in questioning her. In the meantime, Hayes and Kid question the driver. This guy is just pissed because he's being kept in the town too. He's currently not getting paid, and he thinks that the Kid did kill Hanley. They apologize for bothering him and take their leave. Hayes says the guy is either a great liar or he's innocent. Also, I cannot help but notice that Hayes is wearing a wedding ring. There is most definitely a gold band, clear as day, on his left ring finger. Is this part of his cover, or... Anyway, if it wasn't Kid and it wasn't the driver, it had to be Carruthers, right? They ride out to her house, which is huge, and they spot a woman in a buggy riding up to the house, too. Hayes recognizes her as Meg Parker. How the plot thickens. That night at dinner, Margaret Carruthers does indeed show up. The alcalde basically tells the kid, "We'll go get a confession out of her." Dude, isn't that your job? In fact, aren't all the jobs your job, according to your definition of alcalde? Carruthers asks Kid what he thinks happened to Hanley. He says he doesn't know. He tells her he was a wealthy horse breeder from Lexington. And she's like, "How odd. I'm from there too. What a small world." She says the name Hanley sounds a little familiar, but she doesn't think she's ever met him. Hayes, meanwhile, is having dinner with Meg. He asks her what she did on her first day in Santa Marta. She said she just went down to the docks to watch the men fish. He asks her if she went to the countryside. And she's like, "No." Hayes smiles. Caught her in a lie. Later, Hayes and Kid are out walking. And again, this actually looks like night instead of terrible day for night, so good for you, show. Kid tells Hayes that Carruthers has been living in Santa Marta for the last 4 years, and that she was convincing when she said she didn't know Hanley. Hayes says that maybe so, but Meg most certainly was lying. Kid doesn't see how that helps, and she wasn't even in town when Hanley was killed. Before they can talk any further, gunshots ring out. Startled, Hayes grabs Kid and pulls them both off the path and out of sight. They can't see who's shooting at them in the dark. Hayes fires back until whoever it is takes off. But this is good news for the kid, right? As long as he doesn't die. They go and wake up the alcalde and tell him what happened. There's a hole in Kid's hat, and he tells the alcalde that was the first shot and he dodged the second. Yeah, this is nitpicking, but that's not true at all. The first shot missed entirely. Hayes pulled Kid towards cover. Kid lifted his pretty blonde head off, and the shooter shot the hat right off his head. Just for honesty's sake is all I'm saying. Kid says that maybe someone in Santa Marta just doesn't like gringos. Oh yeah, that's it. They hate you because you're white. Calm down, Kid. Or should I call you Karen? The alcalde says many Americans come to Santa Marta and none of them had ever been killed before. They ask if they're allowed to leave town yet. Yeah, that would be a no. He says he's going to look into the shooting. The guys hole up in their hotel room until the alcalde comes back. He tells them that the driver was playing poker at the time of the shots, and Carruthers went straight home to her villa. He tells them that Mrs. Hanley arrived that evening on a private coach. Uh-oh, she'd like a word with the kid. The boys oblige her and go into Mrs. Hanley's room. Oh, if looks could kill. But for real, if I thought some dude killed my husband, there's no way I would let him come into my room. Like, if he's a killer, she even notes that he's wearing a gun. Kid assures her that he liked her husband, and that if she's the one who took the shots, could she maybe stop doing that? Offended, Mrs. Hanley swears she didn't try to shoot him. What kind of woman do you think she is? Kid tells her about Carruthers. Mrs. Hanley remembers the name and says she met her once many years ago. How interesting, since Carruthers claimed she never met Mr. Hanley before. The next day, Kid and Mrs. Hanley go to Carruthers' house. I'm going to be shallow for a moment because Carruthers is hot. Okay, I just had to get that off my chest. Anyway, she's nothing but kind and accommodating to the two of them. Mrs. Hanley asks if she remembers meeting her. Carruthers is like, "Oh, of course. I do remember. You're so pretty, by the way." Mrs. Hanley says she looks very different than she remembers. Carruthers says she just didn't want to get involved in whatever was going on, which is why she told the alcalde she didn't know Hanley. Back at the hotel, Hayes goes to see Meg, who is suddenly taken ill. Right. The same way I used to take ill in grade school when I wanted to go home rather than spend one more second in that hellhole. Hayes confronts her with the knowledge that she lied about visiting Carruthers. She said that was just an oversight. She heard there was another American woman living in town, so she thought she'd pay a visit. But she wasn't home, so she turned back. Hayes just isn't buying that. She asks if he's accusing her of something, and Hayes tells her that he knows his friend didn't murder anyone, so he's ready to suspect anybody. On the ride back, Mrs. Hanley just isn't sure about Carruthers. She met her so briefly and it was so long ago, which I get. Ask me to remember someone I met one time a decade ago and I couldn't do it. I barely remember what my car looks like when I'm going through the parking lot. She does say she has a feeling that she's not the same woman, but she could be wrong. Kid isn't asking her to lie for him, just to tell them what she told him, that she's not sure about Carruthers. When they get back to town, the cops are waiting to escort Kid back to jail. Kid sighs and asks Mrs. Hanley to tell Hayes where he is, please. Hayes storms into the jail, super pissed that Kid has been locked up again, and he angrily demands to know what the hell's going on. The alcalde says that now he has a witness that places Kid at the murder scene, right down to the boots he's wearing. The alcalde says it'll be a short trial, and then a couple of days after that, he'll be killed via firing squad. The alcalde is such a weird character to me, because he seems to like Kid, but he also seems perfectly happy to see him executed too. Maybe it's just that Ben Murphy and Nico Menardos have really, really strong chemistry. Because I've never been into, like, the enemies to lovers trope, but I think I get it here. I wonder what recasting Hayes with Menardos instead of Roger Davis would have looked like. Anyway, Hayes is feeling pretty defeated and sags against the cell bars. Kid's like, get me out of here. He tells Hayes that Mrs. Hanley wasn't sure about Carruthers, and suddenly, Hayes has it all figured out, because he's a genius. He goes back to see Meg with Mrs. Hanley in tow. Mrs. Hanley instantly recognizes her as Margaret Carruthers. She's still denying it and insisting that she's Meg Parker and she's never even been to Lexington. She's got papers to prove it. She's from Cleveland, damn it! Back at the jail, poor Kid stares out the window and pictures himself being marched to his death and killed. Aw, he needs a hug. Mrs. Hanley is positive that Meg is really Carruthers. Hayes tells her that his friend is about to be sentenced to death if she doesn't start telling the truth. And he's sure that the witness who saw him was paid. She's like, well, if he's innocent, then he'll be fine. Okay, well, clearly she's not watching enough of the ID channel if she actually believes innocent people have nothing to worry about. Hayes shouts at her that whatever she's hiding is going to get a man killed, and can she really live with that? And I guess that's the end of that scene, because now he's outside and he notices that Hanley's filly is gone, and the man at the stable said that Mrs. Hanley took her out. Mrs. Hanley has gone back to Carruthers' house and confronts her. She still insists that she is who she says she is, and she gives her birth certificate and other stuff to prove it. Because everyone just keeps their birth certificate, lying around on the mantle, in case someone comes to your house and accuses you of not being who you claim to be. Nevertheless, Mrs. Hanley isn't going for it. She wants to take her back to town to speak with the alcalde. Carruthers agrees to go. They start back the ride on Carruthers' buggy together. Shockingly, Carruthers starts them down a different road. Hayes races to catch up with the two women. Mrs. Hanley and Carruthers start fighting over the reins, and Mrs. Hanley gets knocked off. And Carruthers is about to, beat her to death once Hayes rides up. And now they're all back in the alcalde's office. Carruthers is like, the horse reared. I didn't try and kill her. She's obviously crazy. Hayes brings in Meg Parker, and she's ready to tell the truth. She really came to Santa Marta because she read an article about Mr. Hanley's death, and the article mentioned Margaret Carruthers living there too. She thought that was strange because she's Margaret Carruthers. And fake Carruthers is like, liar! Meg goes on to say that she came down there to see who was using her identity and why. She kept silent because fake Carruthers gave her money. Carruthers is really Elizabeth Carter, and Meg did know her from school. The story went that when Elizabeth was 18, she ran off with an outlaw, ended up murdering said outlaw's brother, stole a bunch of money from him, and then disappeared. Wow. Anyway, Hayes goes to see Kid in the jail and says he did it. He pulled off a miracle. Kid is so excited that he screams out, Hayes! Before catching himself and covering his mouth. It's adorable. In the tag, Kid is lounging in the bathtub while Hayes is trying and failing to mend the kid's hat. He tells Kid the rest of the story. Hanley showed up at fake Carruthers' house to pay a visit to an old friend, found someone else, Elizabeth Carter, who he also knew, so she killed him. That poor guy, killed just because he wanted to catch up with somebody. That's actually really, really sad. Before they leave town, Mrs. Hanley offers them the same job her husband did. Bodyguards. They agree. That's all very sweet, but let's not forget that Kid failed absolutely and totally as a bodyguard. Like, the guy whose body he was supposed to be guarding got murdered. We all remember that, right? That was the plot of the whole episode, yes? I mean, I'm just saying, I wouldn't put my life into his hands after that. The end. I like this episode. some crazy weird tension happening between Kid and the alcalde, a good mystery, Hayes being the clever guy that he is. I just think it's a lot of fun. This episode is not technically a Maverick remake, but it is a Huggins remake. The story was pulled from his first novel, The Double Take, published in 1946. It was made into a movie and used in all of Huggins' shows, and yes, that does include Maverick and The Rockford Files. The line of the episode goes to Hayes. He tells the kid, after one of the many times the alcalde has told him off, quote, "Here you are, trying to get framed for murder, or even killed, in his town. Nobody likes a nuisance." And of course the episode goes to Hayes. Well, I'm sorry, he saves the day. And by the day, I mean the kid's life. How can it not be him? Next time on Alias Smith & Jones, the guys join a cattle drive and people start getting killed one by one. Dun dun dun. Research for this podcast comes mainly from the wonderful book Alias Smith & Jones, The Story of Two Pretty Good Bad Men by Sandra K. Segala and Joanne M. Bagwell. Thanks for listening.